welcome very much to this training course on where we'll talk about stable schools. This is a serial of 4 training sessions from the project roadmap, and today we are talking about stable schools as a participatory method to work towards antimicrobial usage on farms. And we are talking from a Danish experience. So first I'll say a little bit why is this interesting, and then I'll tell shortly the story behind. Then I will tell a bit about how a stable school works, what it is, what is the concept of a stable school, and also why did it work? I mean, what important kind of elements makes a farmer group approach like stable school work, and then we will have a breakout session to discuss at the end of this training session. So why is it interesting? We started a project, and it was almost 20 years ago. We had the first project where we experienced that 4 farmer groups of 23 milk producers halved their antimicrobial use in a year. And we looked at it 5 years later, and we are still actually following up on the same dairy company that started this. And we can see that it is a lasting change. That makes it interesting because a lot of farmers have had over time ambitions to have healthier animals and to lower their antimicrobial use, but actually this worked, and it was working in Denmark. It was working in different countries in Europe. Also, it was like, and that's another important thing to say here, that the stable school, as we call it, these farmer group approaches have to be adjusted to different settings. And also talking about what animal species are we talking about, how are the farm structures and so on. There can be small adjustment, but the principles are the same also in Norway, in Germany, in Austria, in Switzerland, in UK, and wherever else this concept has been used over time. So, and then I come to the story behind. The story behind the stable schools approach in Denmark actually started in Uganda, where farmers were struggling with different diseases, and where we had a project where we were investigating the problems that the farmers had, and then we were supposed to come up with technologies and things that could help making solutions. And one of the things we found was that actually there was a lot of basic things that were lacking, and there was also kind of a basic lack of knowledge, but also maybe lack of experience among farmers. So we adopted a so-called farmer field approach to fit to cattle farmers in Uganda, to create a room for learning and developing solutions together. The way that this farmer field school approach normally would work would be, if we had animals involved, would be to have some kind of demonstration farms where farmers could come and learn, because one of the basic principles behind the farmer field schools was to learn in practice. So don't put yourself in a classroom, go out and learn in practice. And they often learned in demonstration farms. One of the things that we did in our project was to say, well, we should not have demonstration farms, because then we could risk to create, like, what can you say, a kind of a concept of model farmers, that here it is better than there. That was not a pathway to the solutions. We had to look at all the different realities that were present. And another thing is that learning from each other and learning from different contexts also enrich the whole learning process. So we learned about this approach, you could say, in a couple of years in Uganda in 2003, 2004, and saw that it actually worked. One of the important things was not to have these model farms or demonstration farms, but to say that all the farmers who are participating in this have to open their own farm and let others into their own farm. And then we were talking about solutions to the problems they had on this farm. So it was a very practice-based approach. So, and home in Denmark, there was a debate about antibiotics and organic animals. And then a certain dairy company, Tise Dairy Company, at that time with 46 milk producers, actually contacted us, said we want to lower the use of antimicrobials in our dairy company as a whole. And so we started an action research and development project for 1 year, and where we focused on health promotion in the herds and based it on each herd's own context. And we saw it as an advisory method. So farmers advise farmers, and you could say farming life is very different from Uganda to Denmark, very different context, very different local conditions, but it's a kind of the same focus area. I mean, farmers want to make it work. Farmers, for instance, like here in Denmark, they're talking about how to make the best winter feed possible. In Uganda, they talked about how to make the best feed for the dry season. So, so it's very similar. So why not also try this approach in Denmark? And so we did. And we could, I mean, we based it on some, what can you say, arguments. Why should we use a farmers advice farmers approach? That is because they had a common goal that was relevant for all group members. They wanted to lower the use of antimicrobials, and they wanted it primarily through a better animal health. So it was very complex. Farmers are used to handle complexity. And often when you have specialized advisors like feed advisors, they talk about feed, vets talk about diseases and prevention of diseases specifically, and so on. Here, farmers could talk about the whole complexity of the farm and also what were the log-ins for actually choosing some solutions. Sometimes we need to be innovative and not common thinking. That's is also quite, what can you say, common for a lot of farmers. They find solutions on the spot, and and being together creates like a kind of a exploration also of ideas together. And it's about practical daily life and about finding practical solutions that work for everybody on an everyday basis, and take into account other things on the farms that also need to be taken into account. So we had a 1-year project with these 4 groups where we developed these principles that have been used ever since. Right now, it is also part of the Danish legislation that you can actually make these stable schools as a part of your advisory system and so on. We saw changes in the herds over that 1 year, and it was very basic changes. There was nothing strange or completely new or technological or anything. It was about air, hygiene, quality feed, space, peace, so that the cows could actually also be cows, attention of the farmer. It was very, very basic. Hygiene, space, everything that was like a lot of farmers and advisors know that these are very, very important, but it's often not possible really to reach it. And also some innovative and untraditional solutions like harvesting water from roofs that actually allow animals to have water. Then we can discuss whether it's what roof quality and so on. But I mean, that was one innovation that was created in one farm. Letting cows out during the winter, creating conditions so that they could do that, or keeping the calves with foster cows was also a solution that most advisors would advise against, but that farmers made work and discussed also together. And all of these solutions were implemented in maybe in one farm or two farms, but then the other farmers also learned from that. And there was a lot of health promotion on different levels, many different levels. Like here is just an example. It's a photo also taken on one of the farms by the farmer, establishing a calf kitchen with warm water to just keep everything clean. It seems so basic and so logic to have this, but you just need actually to do it, to have it, to make it, and to prioritize it, and then start using it on an everyday basis. And somehow it happened in this process. Okay, so now I want to give an introduction to a full stable school meeting. How is it actually made, and how is it established? How is it run on an everyday basis? So the step one is that the farmer who is the host. So it works in the way that a farmer group of 6 to 8 farmers, they form a group, and they are hosted by the group members in turn, so that one farmer is the host of a meeting, and on that meeting, this farm is in focus. So this farmer that is hosting a meeting should prepare him or herself or themselves by identifying one success on the farm and 2 challenges that they actually want to work with, something that they can improve, something that they want to have a solution, or they want to have a development that could bring them closer to the goal. So one success and 2 challenges. And that has to come from the farmer. And it could be that the farmer will point to something that somebody from outside would not say, this is not, or would say, this is not your biggest challenge. But that doesn't matter really. It is the farmer who is setting the agenda, because the farmer sets the agenda on what he, she, or they need to do something about and perceive that they need to do something about. Oops. So the farmer has been thinking about what would I like to put the agenda, and the facilitator, that is, you can call it the coordinator, we call it the facilitator of the stable school, of the whole group, will call the farmer 8 days before the meeting. And they will ask questions, and they will help describing and formulating these identified areas that are on the agenda. So the farmer has the ideas about what they would like to put the agenda, and the facilitator's job is to ask details, so that if the farmer has said, okay, I want to do to look at something about the somatic cell count, then the facilitator will say, okay, which groups of cows are we talking about? Is it young cows? Is it after? Do they have raised somatic cell counts after calving, or when is it? And so on and so forth. Is it seasonal? I mean, all the details to understand the question. And then they will make the agenda and send the agenda and some data from the farm. In Denmark, we have a lot of data on farm level, and that will be sent to the other farmers. In those days, 20 years ago, it was in envelopes. Today, it's on emails. But every farmer will receive an agenda for the next meeting from the host farmer. And then the meeting comes on the farm. And here in Denmark, all the meetings would start with an introduction to the farm, by a farm walk, 1 hour, walking around in all areas of the farm, and often the selected success story would often be shown here because that's something to demonstrate. And the reason why we have this success story involved is that, yeah, well, it's inspirational. It's something to be that the farmer is proud of, and it's always interesting to see. And every farmer has successes, and every farmer have challenges. So sometimes we focus only on problems, but we actually also sometimes need to reflect a bit about the successes on a farm and to see why did it work and how did it work, and to learn from that too. So we have this farm walk 1 hour in total, and they were not allowed actually to talk about the problems here. They had to see some certain things. Maybe if one of the challenges would be to have a better walkway to the grazing areas, then of course they should see that outside, but they should not start discussing anything or solutions or something like that. They should just look and talk and see what the farm was like. And then they went into the table, to the inside, and they are working in a special way here in around the table with these two problem areas. Here we see a group of farmers and all the papers that have been sent with some data. It's really a little group of Sherlock Holmes people who are trying to find things. They have been looking at the farm, they have been looking at the papers. So we have a meeting now of 1.5 hours after a cup of coffee and maybe a piece of bread. Some of the farmers have been driving maybe for an hour, so we try to make them quite in driving distance also, but they have arrived, and it's always good to have a cup of coffee and a kind of a free talk for some minutes. Normally we said 10 minutes of free coffee, and then the meeting would start. And they work in a special way. The facilitator would start. After the 10 minutes of coffee and free talk, the first problem area would be in focus. And the farmer will tell about it. There will be some questions from the group to understand it. And then there will be a round. So it's not that farmers can just brainstorm freely on this. The facilitator will make sure that one after the other around the table will talk. They can give their opinion on the chosen problem area, and they can give some suggestion to solutions, what they would do if they are in this farm. And the host farmer is actually not allowed to speak in this whole round. Because we experienced that if that was the case, then they would start discussing, and that was not the intention. The intention here was to bring all the ideas on the table before starting to select for the host farmer. After that one round, the host farmer will sum up what he or she thinks after having heard the opinions and reject and reflect. So also the ideas that the host farmer would not like to do should be kind of explicitly said and mentioned. That is not what I'm going to do. And then we will take problem 2, area number 2, in the same way, just the other way around the table, and then the meeting will be finished. So the host farmer is actually concluding at this all the things and say what will the host farmer actually like to do. So that is also a very important thing. And then the role of the facilitator is also very important, because the facilitator is maybe an educated veterinarian or an educated advisor, but is not giving advice and is not the authority at this meeting, but is the facilitator and writing down the points that the farmers are saying, and will take care of all the what can you say, all the notes and so on. And that is yeah, also a little bit, I'll talk about that afterwards. So after the meeting, the facilitator writes the minutes of the meetings and send it to all members. And then 1 month later, there will be a meeting on the next farm in the group. And then the whole same procedure will be carried through. So Why did it work? We analyzed the situation. We made interviews. We have been discussing this with a lot of farmers who have participated, with the facilitators and so on. And now I'm just summing up what were the conclusions of all this. Why did this work? First of all, it was very practical. It had a starting point in everyday's own farm reality. It was very concrete. There was a very, very great sense of ownership, and which is just paramount. The farmers make the agenda, the farmer identifies their own challenges, and the host farmer concludes and commits him or herself to do something, and the group members will follow, because that's another thing, that is that there will be a follow-up in the next round between all the farms. When you come to a farm, you will look at what did you actually say you wanted to do last time, and how is it going? So there is a commitment here and a follow-up also. The farmers, and this is not a Danish organic farmer group, this is helping each other to plan and implement in Uganda, because we went back to Uganda and actually continue to work with this method in what we call the Farmer Family Learning Group projects, and that is also working actually at the moment also in Uganda still. So I just inserted this photo because I think it's very important to say that it can work in so many different contexts. But what the farmers did was also to really help each other to plan and to implement all these things, because they actually came up with all the ideas and put it together. Understanding each other's farms and each farmer and what they want is a very important part of it. It's actually very full of learning to try and understand others. And others, there are definitely things that are very alike between farms and farmers, but there are also differences. And it's very interesting in a group of farmers to actually explore each other's different goals and structures and logic thinking and rationality and so on. So understanding what is happening on each farm and what are your goals has been a great learning for a lot of the farmers participating in these groups. And then there is the role of the facilitator that is very important. And there is a clear distinction between being an advisor and being a facilitator. And this is a quote from a facilitator that I also interviewed some years later, having been facilitator for these stable schools. And it says, the most demanding task being a facilitator was to decode myself as advisor, because as advisor, you're used to always be the one who is supposed to talk, but actually it is as important to listen and to, like in this group, to kind of help the group to exchange and to learn from each other. And that is the important role of the facilitator. And the facilitators, having participated in these groups, are also astonished sometimes how much they learn, and they also say that they use these methods of questioning and making detailed questions and so on in another way also in their daily advisory activity, because they actually find out how powerful it is to really invest time, both their own time but also the farmers' time, in really getting a detailed understanding of the goals and the dynamics and also the problems on the farms. Thank you very much for your attention. And now I would encourage you to think and talk about this concept and how it works and could work in your different home environments.